Okay, your learning goal is the student will know the characteristics of cultural groups of Florida's early history and be able to describe the effects of European colonization in Florida on each group. Okay, this is Chapter 2, Lesson 4, Spanish Settlements. You're on page 60. So right up here it says, cities change over time. This picture shows what St. Augustine looked like in 1673. It is 1673 and you just moved to St. Augustine. Write about what you see around you. So up here, you're going to write me a couple sentences about what you see around you. This is in St. Augustine in 1673. Pause and continue when you're ready. All right, on page 60, here's another picture of St. Augustine in 1586. I'm looking, it looks like a little map here. I see some fish and boats. Let's read. It says, Pedro Menendez de Aviles was a hero of Spain. He defeated the French settlers. He wanted to claim Florida for Spain. Permanent settlers, remember this again is the heading. Menendez de Aviles founded a new settlement along the Atlantic coast in 1565. It was given the name St. Augustine. It was the first European settlement in what is today the United States that has lasted to present-day St. Augustine was important. It was the main northern city of all the Spanish lands in the Americas. St. Augustine was home to Africans as well as Spaniards. Some Africans were enslaved and others were free. Africans worked as soldiers, sailors, carpenters, and tailors. St. Augustine struggled with problems. The Spanish king had a hard time getting people to stay. Many settlers left St. Augustine and moved to other places. Another problem occurred when the Timucua joined with some French soldiers to fight the Spaniard in 1568. Then, in 1586, English sailors destroyed St. Augustine. Settlers struggled with storms, disease, and attacks from other groups for the next 80 years. Forts. Throughout the 1560s and 1570s, Menendez built many military posts, forts, and watchtowers along the Atlantic coast. He took over Fort Caroline. He also gave it a new name, San Mateo. In 1672, work began on a stronger fort in St. Augustine. The fort was named Castillo de San Marcos. It helped protect St. Augustine. On Florida's Gulf Coast, the West Coast, which is where we live, Spain built few settlements. Then in 1698, a Spanish colony was founded at Pensacola. A fort was built. It was named San Carlos de Austria. Number 1, categories. Write the names of the following settlements in the chart below with their correct category. So we have St. Augustine, San Mateo, Castillo de San Marcos, Pensacola, San Carlos de Austria. Spanish settlements in Florida. Which were built on the Atlantic coast, which were built on the Gulf Coast. Write these names down in this chart here from what we read up here. Pause and continue when you're ready. Okay, on page 62, I see some picture of some gold coins here. It says gold coins like these were carried by Spanish treasure fleets. Treasure fleets. The Spanish ships that traveled to and from the Americas were called treasure fleets. A fleet is a large group of ships sailing together. Spanish treasure fleets carried goods and riches between Europe and the Americas in the late 1500s. Two areas rich with treasure were the northern coast of South America and lands in the Caribbean Sea. This entire area was called the Spanish Main. Spanish merchants did business there. Merchants are people who make money buying and selling goods. They traded European goods for gold and silver. Florida's important role. Florida did not have riches like gold or silver, but it still had an important role to play. Ships left the Spanish Main and sailed to Spain loaded with treasure. First, they sailed to Cuba. Then they turned north along the Florida coast. Then they sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. Florida's coastal settlements protected these fleets from enemies. Number 2, Spanish treasure fleets sailed past the coast of Florida. They were protected by coastal settlements. Circle the Spanish settlement that was farthest away from the treasure route. So you're going to circle which one of these was the furthest away. Pause and continue when you're ready. And don't forget to look at the key here. Here, this means the route of the Spanish treasure fleet, and then the little period-looking thing here, the dot, is where there was an early settlement. Page 63, building missions. The main way Spain colonized Florida was by building missions. A mission is a church and settlement where religion is taught. The Spaniards who built the missions had more than one goal. First, they wanted the Native Americans to support the Spanish settlements. For example, the Native Americans farmed so the Spanish settlers had food to eat. Second, the Spaniards wanted the Native Americans to fight for Spain when their territory was attacked. Third, they wanted to convert the Native Americans to Catholicism. To convert means to change from one religion to another. Catholicism is a form of Christianity. Catholic priests began settling Florida in the 1500s. In the missions, Native Americans learned about Catholic beliefs from priests. They also found about the Spanish way of life. Over time, many Native Americans were converted and became Christians. Others, however, did not convert. They resisted the Spaniards. At some missions, the Spaniards forced them to convert and made them work as slaves. At other places, Native Americans could choose for themselves to follow new ways of life. More than 100 missions were founded throughout Florida from the late 1500s through the early 1700s. Most of the Spanish missions were eventually destroyed by English soldiers. By 1706, the mission systems in Florida had ended. Number 3. Mission trails connected one mission to another. On the map, circle the mission that is farthest west, then circle the mission that is farthest south. So here is your map of Florida. Key, here's your mission trail. The church shows a mission, a fort, settlement. Map shows present-day borders. So, and here's your compass rose. So you need to find out, read it again, north, east, southwest. Which one? Circle the farthest west, and then circle the mission farthest south. Pause and continue when you're ready. Mission life. In 1656, a mission was built near present-day Tallahassee. It was named Mission San Luis de Talimali. Inside St. Louis Mission, as it was called, was a busy village. What we know today about life in Florida missions comes from documents or papers from San Luis Mission. We also have artifacts. Artifacts are objects made by people, like pottery. Spanish settlers lived on St. Louis Mission. Houses were made of wood planks. The roofs were made of thatch. Thatch is a plant material such as straw or palm leaves that is used to make a roof. There was a main area in the center of the mission called a plaza. It was used by families for outdoor activities. Some families owned animals. The Apalachee at St. Louis Mission. In addition to the Spanish settlements, more than 1,400 Apalachee lived in or near the mission. Apalachee leaders and their families might have lived in similar thatched roof homes. Others lived on farms. The farms provided crops and livestock for both the Apalachee and the Spaniards. Some Apalachee may have worked as servants in Spanish homes. The Apalachee held meetings and ceremonies in a large, round house called the Council House. It could hold as many as 3,000 people. The Council House at San Luis is the largest Native American building in the entire southeast United States. At the mission, there was tension or uneasiness between some Apalachee and the Spaniards. The problem was that some Apalachee did not want to adopt European culture. They wanted to keep their own culture, but some wanted to also learn European ways of life. For example, some Apalachee learned to raise farm animals that come from Europe, like cattle and hogs. Also, Apalachee women began to create pottery with European designs. The Apalachee were able to keep some of their culture. For example, the Apalachee ball game was still played. Important buildings. The Church of San Luis was an important place. It was made of plank walls and a thatched roof, just like the houses. The church was also at the mission cemetery. Spaniards and Apalachee were buried inside the church. The religious services were performed by men known as friars. Friars taught Catholic beliefs to the Native Americans. Friars lived in a house near the church. Another important building at St. Louis was the fort. There was a tall wooden fence around it. In the center was a blockhouse. It protected the soldiers while they fired their weapons. Some soldiers were Apalachee. Number 4. This is what San Luis Mission looked like around 1700. The land may look dry in the picture, but it was very good for farming. The Apalachee grew corn, squash, and beans. Write the following building names on the picture in their correct places: church, blockhouse, and council house. So right here, the friar's house is already listed. You need to go back and listen to figure out which one belongs in these spaces. Fort Most. The English were busy settling the Americas in the late 1500s and 1600s too. In 1670, English colonists founded a settlement in what is now South Carolina. They brought enslaved Africans with them. By the 1680s, some of these Africans began to escape slavery. They went south into Florida. The Spaniards offered them sanctuary, which is a safe place. In exchange, the Africans had to convert to the Catholic religion. Many Africans lived and worked in St. Augustine for many years. In 1738, they built Fort Musset. It was located just 2 miles north of St. Augustine. Fort Musset protected St. Augustine from English attacks. Many of the Africans were soldiers at the fort. Fort Musset is an important place in American history. It was the first community in what is today the United States where Africans lived free from slavery. The fort became a home to many Africans. When Africans still enslaved by the English heard about Fort Musset, they wanted to move there and be free. In 1994, Fort Musset Historic State Park became a U.S. National Historic Landmark. Today, the fort itself is no longer there, but people still visit the park and learn about its history. Number 5. One important job at Fort Musset was watching out for an enemy. Find the lookout tower on the drawing and circle it. So you're going to find the lookout tower here, circle it. Spanish influence. Today, the effects of Spanish rule in Florida can be seen in many ways. Many cities have Spanish names. Spain affected agriculture by bringing animals and crops that had never been seen before. The Spaniards also brought their own tools and weapons. Native Americans learned to use them. Just 250 years after the Spanish arrived, there were fewer examples of Native American culture. Why did this happen? Conflict and disease led to a severe drop in the Native American populations. Others moved away or joined other groups. Today, descendants of some groups live in Florida and other states. For example, descendants of the Appalachians are living in Louisiana today. These people continue to celebrate their cultural traditions. Number 6, categories. What were the 2 of the biggest benefits Spain got from colonizing Florida? And number 7, you and your family are living in a Spanish settlement on the Atlantic coast of Florida in the late 1500s. The English and local Native Americans attack them often. Why doesn't your family move away? Answer these questions based on what we just read here.